Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Freya Oldham and I work in the MPP North team at Homes England. I'm delighted to welcome you today to our Autumn Learning Programme. This programme offers a series of knowledge sharing sessions on topics that you have told us are of particular interest to you. And today's event is on Homes England's work with local leaders and partners to deliver housing-led mixed-use regeneration in the North. This Autumn Learning Programme is brought to you by Homes England's Local Government Capacity Centre. This slide here just gives a quick summary of who they are, the LGCC. The learning programme is just one of the tools offered by the Local Government Capacity Centre. You can see here our offers also include the Housing Information Hub and a capacity analysis tool, which you can use to assess capacity within your organisation. Just to say, at the end of today's session, we'll look forward to hearing how we did in the survey poll. So please make sure you do answer that. Next slide, please. Okay, on the screen, you're going to see a breakdown of the session agenda for today. I'll just quickly go over it. So I'm kicking things off now with just a brief welcome. Next, we're going to be having an introduction to Homes England's place-based way of working, and that will be from our MPP North Director, Duncan Inglis. After that, we're going to have MPP North Assistant Director, Tamsin Hart-Jones, joined by Simon Dew, Development Director at Muse, and Angela Blake, Assistant Director in the Department of Place at Bradford City Council. And they're going to talk us through the Bradford City Village project and the wider West Yorkshire SPP, Strategic Place Partnership. And then following that, we'll have the first part of today's Q&A, which is going to be focused on Bradford City Village and the West Yorks SPP. Afterwards, we'll then be hearing from Catherine Holmes, Assistant Director in MPP North at Homes England. And Catherine's joined by partners Tom Booty, who's Head of Regeneration Delivery at Wirral Council, and Becky Joyce, Director at Radix Consulting. And they're going to give us an overview of their work in Liverpool City region with a focus on Hind Street Urban Village. We'll then have the second Q&A to follow that. And then finally, we're going to close just before 12 p.m. with some further polls. And as I say, that just gives some immediate feedback on today's presentation and ideas for future sessions. Okay, I'm now going to hand you over to our first presenter, Duncan.
Morning, everyone. Great to see so many people on the call. My name's Duncan Inglis. I'm the Director for Markets, Partners and Places for the North of England. And just for the avoidance of doubt, that's the proper North. That's from Hull over to Chester and everything above. You just move on to the next slide. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the shift from where we've come from as an agency to where we are now, which is really our strategic plan set out a shift from being a purely housing supply agency to moving towards more place-based regeneration. Essentially, I always start on the basis that some of you will obviously have worked with the agency previously, but some of you will be new to the agency. So we're an arm's length body. We deliver national programs, national policy, but essentially we're responding to local needs and working with local partners. The way that we work is to develop pipelines of projects with partners to get them to be investable propositions. We look at the range of challenges that we have in delivering those projects and how we as an agency can intervene to help. Just move on to the next slide. So essentially, we've got a housing offer that's available to everybody, but we tend to concentrate on those places and projects where we can have the greatest impact, particularly in the urban areas that we work in the North. A lot of the projects require a range of interventions. So it's not just a single fund or a site assembly issue. It tends to be a combination of all of those things. And I guess a lot of perceptions of the agency have been defined by which part of the agency local authorities have worked with. So as an agency, we have land, we have funding, we have skills and capacity. And it's quite difficult sometimes for partners to navigate, which part of the agency they need to work with. So essentially what we do now is working with places is we bring that whole agency offer to play, whether that is development, whether it's funding, whether it's capacity and skills. So it's just I suppose, a gateway to the agency. If we just move on to the next slide. Essentially what we do is, as I said, we've got a range of national programs that are available, but we really can only work where those places have a clear vision, have an appetite for partnership working, and there is the scale of opportunity that we can corral those resources around. The area where that's probably most prevalent, particularly in the north, is through the work that we do with our strategic place partnerships. So these are essentially a genuine partnership between mayoral combined authorities, the constituent local authorities, and Homes England, as well as working with a range of delivery partners. So with the strategic place partnerships that we have across the north, we probably cover about 80% of the population. So what we do in those strategic place partnerships is, rather than partners having to navigate between local authorities, combined authorities ourselves, or the plethora of different funding programs, we work together to say, well, what are the most strategic projects for place? How do we align the funds and the resources that the combined authority have available to them with what we have available? And how do we work with those constituent local authorities to identify what the priorities are, what the barriers to delivery are, and then how collectively we can work together to get, a combination of those different agencies working together around a single focus. So what you'll see today is really that shift from being, very housing focused to more housing and regen led, and the complexity of some of the projects that we work on. So we've got Tamsin Hart-Jones, together with colleagues from the local authority and from private sector partners, joining us to say, how do we work collectively together? And then similarly with Liverpool City region, again, a combination of all of the constituent partners working together on just a single focus. So if I just hand you over to Tamsin Hart-Jones, and Tamsin will hopefully bring that to life in terms of the great work that we're doing in Bradford, along with Muse and Bradford City Council. So Tamsin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Really pleased to be here and be able to talk to you all about the work that we've been doing in West Yorkshire, and particularly Bradford City Village. So I am joined, as has been mentioned, by a couple of our partners who've been fundamental to the project and to getting things up and running. So Simon Dew is here with me in the room. We're on separate laptops, but if you see me looking across, it's because I'm looking across at Simon. And Angela Blake, Simon, I should say, is from Muse, Development Director at Muse, and we've got Angela Blake, who is Assistant Director at Bradford Council. So we are just going to talk you through the project and a little bit of background about it. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to give a bit of an introduction. I hope many of you have been to West Yorks and know where that is, but just for reference, this is West Yorkshire, and Bradford is one of the 5 constituent local authorities of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. If we move on to the next slide, Duncan's given us a bit of an intro there in terms of the work that we've been doing across the north on the strategic place partnerships, and indeed West Yorkshire, we signed a strategic place partnership back in May 2023, and here's a lovely picture of the signing event that happened at UK Reef. It's been a really important thing for us, really building on the relationship we'd already built with the combined authority, but it enables us effectively to set out, both for ourselves and to our partners, the key priorities of both our organisations, the key things that Homes England and the combined authority are going to anchor around, and those things were identified by our local authority partners. So they said to us, these are the things that we really want you to focus on and help us to deliver. So we have within the strategic place partnership 3 strategic objectives. So we have one around building investment ready projects. And Bradford City Village is a perfect example of that. We have another one around creating sustainable communities. So we've initially been doing work around how can we bring more modern methods of construction projects into West Yorkshire, how can we utilise that more? But we're also thinking the broader agenda around the sustainable location of development and net zero. And last but certainly not least, our final strategic objective in the Strategic Place Partnership is all about building more affordable homes. The Mayor, who we see there, Tracy Brabin, she has her target and did in a previous term as well for the delivery of 5,000 affordable homes. So making sure we're doing everything that we can to support the local authorities and combined authority and all of our partners in the region to deliver more affordable homes. Those are the critical elements of the Strategic Place Partnership. So we wanted to talk to you about Bradford City Village because Bradford City Village is one of those identified focus areas for building an investment ready project. The council were really, really clear with us to say the most important thing for us, the quickest thing that we want you to address is Bradford City Village as part of a wider regeneration of Bradford City Centre. And Angela's going to be talking to you more about that. So we've really focused, there's a Bradford City Centre overall, and Bradford City Village is the near-term project. So the thing that's really going to start to make a difference. And we're also working on Southern Gateway, which is a slightly longer term proposition, but our focus in the first instance has particularly been to make sure that we can get Bradford City Village happening. So on that note, if we could move on to the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Angela just to talk you through the city and City Village within that.
Thank you, Tamsin. Good morning, everybody. As Tam said, my name is Angela Blake. I'm the Assistant Director for Economy and Development at Bradford Council. I'm just going to talk you through a few slides just to give some context on Bradford, the journey that we're on, what we've delivered already, and what our next steps are. So just to give a little bit of context on Bradford, we're the fourth largest local authority in England with a population of 560,200, 338 of those, thousand of those within the city centre. To put that into context, Newcastle has a population of 300,125, so we are an extremely large city area. We've got 5 constituencies, 4 Labour and 1 Conservative, and that changed in the last election. And we've got some key urban settlements, Bradford being the main one, and then we've got the towns of Shipley, Bingley, Keighley and Ilkley. We can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. An unprecedented level of investment is going into Bradford City Centre to help drive the city's future success. This includes an 80 million Transforming Cities Fund programme, which has moved traffic out of the city centre and created a much greener and safer city centre. And that's helping connectivity, active travel, and just opening up and creating parkland and open space. We're currently delivering a new city market, so that's consolidating 2 markets into 1 new facility. We've recently completed Bradford Live, which is a 4,000 capacity entertainment venue, and that'll be opening in the new year, ready for City of Culture 2025. We've also recently completed One City Park, which is a 56,000 square foot Grade A office development and now home to PwC, who have chosen Bradford as one of their main hubs and have taken the top 2 floors of that new office development. City Village is our next step. It's a key part of this transformation and forms part of the wider plan to diversify and future-proof Bradford City Centre. It'll increase the vibrancy and prosperity of the city and help to create an attractive place for people to live, work, invest and visit. Just move on, please, to the next slide. So this slide shows the main sites that are within the city village development area. The regeneration area covers approximately 25 hectares in the city centre. It encompasses the top of town and Darley Street areas to the north of Centenary Square and Bradford Forster Square station to the west. Historically, the retail and commercial heart of the city, the area has seen a decline over recent years and currently suffers from a lack of footfall. The city village boundary includes 3 potential development sites, all of which are in council ownership. So the site to the top, Chain Street, is a current car park site. Osler is one of the current market sites that will be consolidated into the new market. And the Caregate site is a shopping mall and also home to the other market site within the city centre. And we acquired the Caregate site back in 2022 as part of the city village scheme. We can move on to the next one. This is just some visuals to show you what those sites look like at the moment. So the top one is the Caregate shopping mall and market site right in the heart of the city centre. The picture to the bottom left is the Osler market site, and to the right you've got the car park site. And the car park site will form first phase of City Village, which Simon will come on to when in the next presentation. So just to give a little bit about who's behind City Village. City Village is being delivered by Bradford Council and English Cities Fund, which is a development company that brings together the combined expertise of Homes England, Investors Legal and General, and National Placemakers Muse. ECF were appointed via the Pagabo framework. The council took the decision on the 5th of November, just a couple of weeks ago, to approve the principle of the appointment of English Cities Fund as our preferred development partner, following the pre-development services agreement that we've just completed for that first phase of these works. English Cities Fund is responsible for preparing the planning applications and undertaking the design, entering into a building contract and professional appointments with its supply chain, and managing the development programme through to completion. Homes England and Wicklow are also supporting us with funding strategy and package, and we announced the 29.4 million that was secured through the bill funding from Homes England just a couple of weeks ago at the time we took the decision at exec. And so we're really positive about the relationship and the partnership, and the scheme is really progressing at some pace now. So I'll pass over to Simon now, who'll talk you through where we've got to and our next steps. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Morning, everybody. Yeah, one of the things I wanted to touch on first, which has been really important to shaping our plans for City Village, is that pre-development period that Angela mentioned. We essentially had a period of about 18 months where we worked with the council and Homes England through our ECF structure to start shaping our plans for City Village. And one of the things that involved from the outset was establishing a really strong governance structure with WICA and Homes England as part of those steering groups and project boards that we implemented to sort of really start to move the scheme forward with some momentum. In addition to that, key to our sort of shaping of the master plan that you can see here was a large amount of consultation and stakeholder engagement that we did as we worked through our initial plans for the site, and that involved doing a lot of hours walking the streets, manning stands in shopping centres within Bradford City Centre, and really getting an understanding of what people wanted to see in this area of the city and what their perspectives were currently of the old Kirkgate Shopping Centre, Darley Street, which was the previous retail core of Bradford, and inevitably there was some negative themes that came out of those initial conversations about the fact that this area was in decline. You know, retail had shifted down to the Broadway shopping centre. And people were very keen to see this area regenerated and keen to see progress. I think what also I took away massively from those initial engagement sessions was the real young and diverse population that Bradford has, and how keen and supportive they were of seeing something happening in the city that was similar to what you see in Leeds and Manchester. People want city living. They want to have leisure time in the city centre.
you know, we had a real endorsement from many young people that that this was a scheme that was very important to them. And I think just touching on the One City Park building that Angela mentioned as well, when Muse delivered that, you know, we've been talking to employers subsequently, including PwC. You know, what comes through really strongly is that one of the first things that employers want to see when they're looking at a new location in the city centre is what the you know, what the residential accommodation is like, what the leisure scene is like for their workforce. It's all about obviously workforce retention, and if you haven't got that wider offer in terms of city living, good public transport, good access to leisure facilities, then it really puts off employers, and they aren't keen to come to that city. So they were the challenges we needed to overcome. I'm hoping that we can share the slide again in a minute. It looks like it's coming back up. But essentially, what our master plan sought to achieve was a number of really key design principles. Predominantly, it needs to create a place for everybody. So a mix of housing tenures to attract young renters and purchasers. So a mix of different housing types, which involves potentially townhousing on the top of the Osler site, which we'll come on to in a minute in some of the later slides, but also a range of apartments as well. So potentially BTR accommodation on the Kirkgate site facing the new markets, and then potentially some lower level apartments on the Osler site as well. But crucially, a range of accommodation that's going to appeal to a range of different occupiers, young people, but also young families who want to get on the housing ladder. We've also really prioritised the fact that we need to start revealing some of the fantastic buildings that Bradford has in the city centre. So Kirkgate and the Osler buildings since the 1970s have basically cut off a lot of the views to some of the special buildings that Bradford have. So the opportunity of the master plan is to reveal some of those lovely buildings again that have been obscured by 1970s architecture for decades. And also, Angela touched on some of the other initiatives that are happening within Bradford. You know, crucially, public transport improvements, mass transits coming into the city centre, improvements to Foster Square and the main interchange with the through station. So it's all about creating a place that's very sustainable, gives people good access to local transport, to public transport, but also other sustainable transport choices. And then finally, the other key aspect of the Bradford City Village proposal is you can see on the master plan here, we've got a real network of green streets and traffic calmed areas. And the bill investment from Homes England is going to really allow us to sort of pump prime these areas, do the enabling works we need to do in terms of demolishing Kirkgate and Osler, but then introduce this sort of series of green streets that link the top of town within Bradford, where the Osler site is, right the way down to where the Kirkgate shopping centre is, and then beyond into Market Street and the Broadway. And without that bill investment from Homes England, we wouldn't be able to create the place that is crucial to then, you know, building confidence with investors and occupiers that this is a place that they can live in. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So there's a few images to show you which just give you a flavour for what we're hoping to achieve in City Village. We're currently moving forward with concluding our build funding agreement in the next week or so, also the development agreement with the council, and then we move into full sort of planning preparation mode, and we've got consultation work starting again in February with a view to submitting a hybrid application across the site in April. Now that will include sort of outline elements of the City Village scheme, but also detailed elements to allow us to deliver a first phase of townhouses. This is a view of the Osler showing some of the townhouses that we're keen to bring forward on that site with some lower level apartments. And then the next slide is a better view of the townhouses that we're looking to bring forward. Crucial to the delivery of this first townhouse phase, which will be about 100 homes, predominantly 2 and 3 bed townhouses, which will be highly sustainable, is delivery of these in partnership with an RP. So we've been working to conclude a selection exercise to appoint an RP partner who will essentially forward fund these first phases of townhouses. So ECF will deliver these homes in partnership with an RP, and we're talking to the combined authority regarding some brownfield housing funding support that we need to deliver this first phase of housing. And then crucially, we'll use the RP as our partner to deliver those mix of tenures that I touched on earlier. So these 100 homes will incorporate a range of shared ownership opportunities, but also rent to buy, affordable rents, trying to give as much diversified housing tenures as we can to get as many people living in the city centre as possible. And then finally, last slide, this is one of my favourite views. So if you've ever been to Bradford and you walk up to Darley Street, this current view is you can't see this. It's obscured by the corner of the Kirkgate shopping centre, that great big 1970s sort of block that sits there and obscures everything. On the right there, you can see the new markets that Angela mentioned, with the sort of interesting roof line. But crucially, the current Kirkgate shopping centre follows the line of the trees right next to the market. What we can do with the delivery of our new BTR phases on the Kirkgate site is pull back that building line, deliver a new fantastic park that'll be right in the centre of the of Bradford city centre, and reveal those lovely buildings that have been obscured by the Kirkgate shopping centre for many years. So one of the key aims of the master plan and our early phases will be is to repair that historic kind of street pattern that Bradford used to have, the old Victorian streets that connect the bottom of the city up to the top, that have been obscured for so many years by the Kirkgate shopping centre. So really exciting opportunities to sort of reveal some of those special heritage views that have been hidden for so long. I'll stop talking now and hand over to Tamsin, who'll talk a little bit more about Bradford.
Thank you very much, Simon. So what was the issue here? Why are Homes England and the Combined Authority and the Council having to do something here? Well, for those of you that know Bradford City Centre will know that particularly within the city centre of Bradford, there is a really challenging residential market. So the values haven't been significant within the city, and actually there's not been a great deal of quality new development within the city, so it's been really challenging to have comparables, and we're really focused on investing through City Village in placemaking so that we can help to move the dial for Bradford. I mentioned Southern Gateway. It's really important for us that Bradford City Village kind of sets the tone for Southern Gateway, the next big regeneration project that, as I say, we're already working on together. So increasing investor confidence has been critical. Angela has mentioned already the City of Culture 2025, which we're really excited about. So being able to demonstrate things are changing in Bradford's been really important. We've talked about the challenges of the site, the requirement for demolition, the requirement for public realm and highways, and that's meant there's been significant upfront infrastructure costs of the scheme, which have created a viability challenge. We have also got challenges around our benefit cost ratio. So many of you will know that as part of a public sector investment, particularly the Brownfield Infrastructure Land Fund, we have to demonstrate that there are sufficient benefits to balance against the costs of that investment. So that's been a challenge given land values in Bradford and land value uplift. So I'll touch on that in a moment. We've had to think about different ways that we can make sure that we're demonstrating the benefits. And obviously, as we've talked through, there are clear market failures which give us a clear reason to intervene and get involved. If we could move to the next slide. So in terms of the solution, what have we been doing? Fundamentally, this all comes from collaborative working between the partners. And as I say, with placemaking, the ambition, the vision, placemaking at its heart, so we can move that dial. So the partners around the table, Homes England, Bradford Council and the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, working with the English Cities Fund, have been working together to develop that funding strategy and think about how we each might be able to intervene to support. That included initially investment from both Homes England and the Combined Authority in resource funding to develop up the project as well. So that's been really, really important. So as you say, we've got commitments from the council and Homes England so far in terms of council. Obviously they've acquired land, there's the costs around vacant possession. Homes England, Angela mentioned the good news about the approval of our brownfield infrastructure and land funding, circa 29 million, which is really important, and kind of is, as I describe it, one of the first dominoes. So it's been really important that we've been getting decisions in principle which act as dominoes for other decisions, so we can assemble the funding package in total. The Combined Authority are currently looking at whether they might be able to support, and that's really important, because of course the Homes England funding that we have through the Brownfield Infrastructure Land Fund can fund the effectively the challenges of the in the ground issues of the site, but we haven't got funding that directly funds the viability gap. So that's something that we're talking to the Combined Authority about. And we also recognise, because we have ambitions for delivery of affordable homes here, that there is likely to be an ask of the Affordable Homes Programme as well. So one of the ways that we've looked at the project and how we can support it has been fundamentally to work really collaboratively with the Combined Authority, so doing a joint benefit cost ratio and share as much as we can of a business case for investment. For our benefit cost ratio, very clever people in our economics team have been supporting us with this to, as I say, maximise those benefits of the scheme and be able to monetize those. So thinking about the wider impacts of the scheme, but also the sustainable travel benefits of people living in the city centre. So that's been really important for us to be able to create a scheme that works, that stacks up. So if we could move on to the next slide. This is the last slide from us before we move into the panel session, and it's just really a bit of thought around the kind of lessons learned. Many of you will be coming to this thinking, well, how can I apply these lessons to our projects? And what I'd say from our experience thus far is being able to focus on the priorities. So Angela and team at the council's real clear steers to us. These are the priorities. This is absolutely what we've got to get right to catalyse other sites within the city. That's been really important for us. Collaboration is key, the strategic place partnership, working together as a collective to resolve the challenge, really proactively thinking about how we can resolve it together, and also to shape the project from the outset. So as I say, we've been involved in this project for a while all together, trying to work through it. I think leadership and the governance around it's been really important. So obviously the strategic place partnership, the endorsement from the mayor as the leader of the Combined Authority, as well as the leadership within the council, that's been critical to be able to say, again, this is a priority, but also having the governance structure in place that's helped to drive the project forward. So we have a project board, we have a group that sits underneath that, a steering group, and we have work streams. So it's been really important to have that governance structure to make sure that we're all heading in the right direction in a timely manner. As I say, economic case, having a look at those alternative options. There's work available on our internet page, which is all around the work that our economics team have been doing with government around social value and capturing benefits. That's worth a look to inform kind of your thinking as well, if you have particular challenges there. And last but not least, bringing English Cities Fund in the way that Bradford have done to help to design the scheme up has been really important here, and has been really helpful to be able to design a scheme up that works. So here we've definitely had that kind of co-development, but with that private sector intelligence feeding into what that might look like. So I think we're moving into the Q&A. Hand over to Freya.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Tam. And if yourself, Simon and Angela can put your cameras on for this section, that would be fantastic. So we'll yeah, we've got some great questions in the chat, so I'll just start going through. And I think, Simon, the first one's for you. So it's around can you share information on your engagement strategy? Does it also address ideas to generate locally focused social value, addressing needs and aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on the engagement strategy briefly when I was talking through the slides, and it's been a very comprehensive piece of work so far, but it's still continuing. So I think it sort of has a number of sort of elements to it, really. Understanding what people want in the city, but also understanding what our social value strategy for City Village needs to address in terms of some of those needs that people have, you know, whether it be educational needs and how City Village can generate you know, relationships and partnerships with local colleges and the university, but also, you know, how we activate those ground floor spaces. It's not just about delivering apartments and houses. We want to understand, you know, what community groups and charities might actually be part of what we're doing on the ground floor, and then in addition to that, you know, taking probably a fresh approach to some of those other uses that we incorporate on the ground floor. So focusing on perhaps independent operators, retailers, leisure operators, rather than looking at, you know, the sort of main street chains that you seem to get in city centres or have done in the past. So it's about a scheme that will really understand, you know, what the local needs of Bradford are. And then as we move into the sort of planning and post-planning stage, we're going to really start to shape our social value strategy, so it's very bespoke to Bradford and weaves in a lot of those themes that we've been talking about. But in terms of, you know, who we've engaged with now and who we will be engaged with as we go forward, it's not just about setting up a website and manning a few stands in the shopping centre. It's about reaching out into the communities, understanding what people like and don't like about Bradford, and of course some of those communities that are around Bradford city centre, you know, some people, particularly within the Asian communities, don't come into the city centre. They're very self-contained in terms of areas like Manningham. So we want to understand how can we encourage them to come into the city. What type of housing would they be interested in living in, and how can we deliver a scheme that's for everybody, not just necessarily gentrifying an area of Bradford. It needs to be a scheme that encourages local people to live in there as well. So I think you know, it's a crucial part of what we've been doing, and it will continue as we move into our pre-planning stage in the new year, so we can continue to shape our proposals.
Great. I think this question kind of follows on a little bit. So it asks, there appears to be a significant number of apartments. Did your engagement suggest that families would be happy to live in 2 3-bed apartments?
So that's a question we get asked quite a lot, actually, and I think what's important to recognise with Bradford City Village and what it aims to achieve is that this isn't a family housing scheme. We do want to provide a level of housing which is predominantly the townhouses where young families could come and live in the city centre. But what we sort of have recognised, and I think this scheme needs to address, is that we've got a very young population within Bradford. 29% of the population of Bradford is under the age of 18, and we know that the young people want to come and live in the city centre and live in similar ways to what we're seeing in Leeds and Manchester. So delivering apartments for families isn't what we're trying to target here. We're trying to drive prosperity of Bradford, and we're trying to get young people and some young families as well, admittedly, but we want this to be a scheme that's aimed towards the younger generation who will come in, live in the city centre, use the facilities that the city has, use public transport, and drive economic activity that we see in Leeds and Manchester. So we're quite clear on that, and I think aligned to that as well, we know from speaking to everybody in the community that as soon as families get to a certain size, they start to move out into the districts within Bradford. So that certainly from a multi-generational living perspective, you know, in the Muslim communities, what suits those families better is the large Victorian properties that you tend to get in some of the districts around the city centre, where they can have, you know, granny and granda living with them. They can have 5, 6, 7 bedroom houses. That's not what City Village sets out to achieve. It's about providing that mix of tenures, but addressing that really local young population that we know we have, but also attracting commuters across as well. We know that Leeds and Bradford has one of the highest commuter flows in the country. So there's every opportunity to have people living in Bradford commuting to Leeds using those excellent transport links, because Bradford provides an alternative solution to maybe living in Leeds. So there's lots of opportunities that we want to address there, but flexibility is the key, really.
Brilliant. I'll put this out to any of you. So were other local public sector bodies involved as stakeholders? It appears from the master plan that there may be some positive impacts on health in an area that scores highly on the index of multiple deprivation. So it would be good to know if health bodies were engaged and engaging.
Okay, do you want me to come in on that one? So yes, there have been. So we've been doing internally within the council. We've been developing the proposals across departments. So all of our members of corporate management team have been involved to ensure that they've inputted from their areas of work, but also through the health and wellbeing board as part of our wider regeneration plans. We've been engaging with health partners. There is more to do, and as we start, as we move through the stages, the next phases of development and plan it as part of the consultation for when we're going forward with planning, we'll be doing further engagement with key stakeholders, with education and with health providers to make sure that we can reflect the needs within the city village area, or make sure that the facilities that we've already got around the city centre are able to meet an increasing demand.
Great. This one kind of follows on again. So with viability challenges and significant on-site costs such as demolition, is social infrastructure such as schools, health, unfunded from the development? If unfunded, does this impact placemaking desires?
At the moment, we're still doing the work to see whether we've got capacity within existing infrastructure and how we can improve existing infrastructure to meet the education and health needs. So there isn't new funding built in there to provide any new facilities. We don't think new facilities will be required. We think it will be investment in existing.
Okay. Well, we'll go to this one. Given the lack of existing city centre resi market in Bradford, could you give any insight into the long-term risk ownership on the scheme and how the partners have got comfortable with this?
Yeah, I'll pick that one up, Freya. I think that the funding and delivery strategy that we have for City Village is based on a forward-funded model. So what we're anticipating will happen, we've got a number of early phases that we're looking to deliver, which will be facilitated not just through the bill support that we've secured, but also through the support that we're progressing with the combined authority. So capitalist delivery of townhouses, capitalist delivery of apartments. We know there's market failure. The intention is that we deliver early phases, we deliver the place-changing public realm and highways improvements that we've been talking about through bill. And then the intention, as Tamsin said earlier on, is to shift the dial in terms of achieving a place-making premium and generating a level of investor confidence that will then allow us to see, the sort of necessary improvements to capital values that you see in places like Leeds. So just to give everybody a bit of a comparison, I think Leeds capital values probably at the moment have gone over the £500 per square foot mark. Currently in Bradford, we're probably at about £190 to £200 a square foot in the city centre. But the problem is that Bradford hasn't had any BTR or city centre living really delivered for many years. It's generally been piecemeal, and it's been conversions of existing listed buildings, nothing that's been specific. So the intention is, like we've done in Salford and Canning Town and Merchant Gate and Wakefield, is to move the dial, create the place, generate that confidence with occupiers and investors, and then see how we can move that growth forward. And then that will allow us to bring in other forward funders for later phases, the more traditional BTR forward funders that you tend to see operating in Leeds and Manchester, and they will have the confidence to invest in those later phases. But it's all about obviously pump priming the scheme, delivering those catalyst phases to give people that confidence that this is a scheme that's got legs, and it'll happen basically.
Great. Touching on phases, we've had a question around sustainable transport links and wanting to know what is the latest of the bus station site.
Oh, that's definitely a one for Angela.
I better come into that one again. So yeah, the bus station site will reopen in January. So that's under control of the Combined Authority, and we've been working really closely with them just to make sure that, you know, we've been managing the buses on the streets over the last few months while works have been undertaken to the bus station, but that will be reopening. And they'll be coming back off Jacobswell back into the station in January. Just on transport links, we're obviously part of the West Yorkshire proposals for mass transit, and we're working closely with the Combined Authority on the route options for mass transit. That will be a real positive for the district and a real positive for Bradford. But we've also got the plans for the through station, which we're working very closely with government and Department for Transport on taking the plans forward for the new through station, and that's a strategic outline business case at the moment. But it is a long-term project. So we're doing the development work at the moment to look at the preferred location for that.
Good to have that overview. I'll stick with you, Angela. We've had a question. What is your learning from using Pagabo as a procurement route?
So when we first started on this journey, and it wasn't without its challenges, we've looked at models across the country where councils have gone into partnership with English Cities Fund, and they've all been very different models. There doesn't seem to be one model that is the model to go forward and is fit for purpose. So we had to engage legal advice to work through how we could go through the Pagabo framework. So it did take us quite a while to navigate the legalities of entering into arrangement with Pagabo through Pagabo framework with English Cities Fund. But that it's a journey worth taking. That's all I can say. It was challenging to start with, but it's a really positive relationship now.
Just to add to that. Just to add to that, Ange, as well, I think probably the lesson learned for all of us with using the Pagabo framework, and Tamsin touched on it earlier, was that you go down the sort of traditional competitive dialogue route, you pick somebody after probably a year or so, and then you start working on a master plan and a funding and delivery strategy for the scheme. What we've been able to do through Pagabo is get ECF on board 18 months ago, and then we've used that time that you probably would have ordinarily been using to do competitive dialogue to actually shape the master plan, engage with Homes England, engage with the Combined Authority. So we've got to the stage where we should be signing the DA in the next week or so, and we will move straight into planning application, and we've already secured bill from Homes England. So we've actually achieved a massive amount in the time that perhaps would have ordinarily been spent in procuring a partner. And obviously, Pagabo has allowed us to do that. The unique approach of ECF has probably given the council confidence as well that they could directly appoint ECF, because it's a very unique partner to have, isn't it, with Homes England, L&G and Muse on board. But yeah, I think we could all agree it's been a really useful time, hasn't it?
Great, that's really good to know. Looking at time, I think we've got maybe time for just one or two more questions. So this has been quite a popular one. Could you please outline the tenure split? So i.e. affordable rent, social rent, affordable home ownership? Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key on this is probably to say it's going to be as flexible as we can achieve. So we've obviously been discussing with planners what our affordable strategy will be, and the early discussions we've been having with our RP partners are such that all of them have come back and said, well, we're happy to do a proportion of shared ownership. I think the proposals we've had in for the townhouse phase, because we're going to announce a partner for that phase shortly, is round about 50 to 60% shared ownership, and then the remainder is a mixture of rent to buy and affordable rent. But then conversely, the apartment phases that we're looking at, we're looking at delivering those on a BTR private rent basis, because the intention is that we obviously want to introduce private rent into the city centre like we're seeing in other cities. So it's not about delivering pure affordable housing. And then, we're looking to explore other angles as well. Over in Salford, we've just delivered a passive house apartment scheme with Salix, which is a really exciting opportunity. And we could do the same within City Village as well, which would be affordable rent. But the exciting thing of Passive House is obviously it's not just affordable in terms of rent, it's affordable in terms of bills. And I think our Passive House apartment scheme over in Salford, it's about £40 a month for electric only for the occupiers there. So it gives the benefits directly to the tenants, which is a massive help for a lot of young people trying to get on the housing ladder in Salford. So I think flexibility is the key. No hard and fast rules on that. All about engaging with our RP partners, our private investment, BTR partners, and also obviously the council and the local planning authority.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. I mean, that's all we've got time for on the Q&A there, but really appreciate the presentation and your thoughts there and responses to the questions. Lovely. So we're now on to the kind of second half of our session today, and I'm going to hand you over to the speakers for the second case study. So Catherine, if you're there, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Freya. I am joined today by Tom Booty. Due to
Hello.
IT issues, we are sharing a laptop, so please do bear with us. And also online is Becky Joyce from, excuse me, Radix Consulting, who will be supporting us in the Q&A session. So we wanted to take you over to Liverpool City region. Now, could you just move me on to the next slide, please? Just a bit of context. Liverpool City region, with a population of 1.6 million, is composed of those 6 local authorities shown there on the map. They form the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, which is led by Mayor Rotherham, who was elected in 2017. And very similar to what Tamsin has said in respect of Bradford and so on, we have worked really collaboratively with the city region and the constituent local authorities for many years now. We've had joint project teams, joint governance structures around some of those transformational projects, but we didn't formalise our relationship via an SPP until September of this year. So we are now keenly working on a business plan and a delivery plan as we go forward. But what you will see is that the 2 projects that we're going to talk about today, they are very firmly embedded in that SPP way of working. So if we go across to Wirral first and Wirral Left Bank, very similar to many of the local authorities that we deal with in the north, the challenges here are similar to what we've heard of this morning. Deprived, some of the most deprived wards in the UK, and some parts of the Wirral life expectancy differs by about 10 to 12 years. Left Bank in particular, which is the area that we focused on with Wirral Council over the last few years, has particularly challenged with land ownership, low land values, so viability challenges. A lot of the land is contaminated due to previous industrial uses. And many of the schemes that that the council would like to see brought forward do have infrastructure requirements. Very similar again to what we've heard this morning. There are issues over transport and connectivity, the quality of the public realm, and many of the sites have lacked any sort of private sector investment for many years. And again, that town centre repurposing and town centre improvement is required in order to deliver that overall ambition and vision that the local authority has. So Homes England and Wirral Council started to talk about Left Bank probably about 3 years ago. And Wirral were very ambitious and they had a clear vision as to what they wanted to deliver in what they described as Left Bank, where there is an opportunity to bring forward something like 20,000 homes over a longer period, 6,000 jobs. Some of that regeneration had started. There'd been some early HIF award around Wirral Waters, which we can see on one of the slides here, but there was still a lot of untapped opportunity within the Left Bank area itself. But clearly, a lot of those challenges that we just outlined needed to be overcome in order to crystallise that opportunity. So Wirral said, fabulous sort of vision here. We've got the Regen 2040 framework, which outlines what we would like to take forward. but we're not quite sure how to deconstruct this vision into parts that might be investable by yourselves or by the combined authority or other partners. So we at Homes England started to use the skills and capacity that we have here to work with the council, and also use some modest revenue funding to start to look at where the early phases of opportunity might be, where we could bring forward some brownfield land, maybe formalise a funding structure around that proposition, and then consider deliverability and so on. We helped the council, who, like many other councils across the north, suffered from the people skills. Essentially, they'd lost people in their development team over the years, so there was that sort of skills gap there anyway. We helped them with project management support. We helped governance structures establish a joint working group, so that rather than them having separate conversations with the combined authority and with developers and with Homes England, we formalised a structure so those conversations could take place in one place. And then a board was also established so we could escalate any issues that needed to be escalated. It's all very fundamental, but actually it took time and energy and a willingness on the part of the stakeholders to pull that together so that we could start to have those sensible conversations that would lead us to better defining the proposition and the opportunity that was available to us. We also entered into a collaboration agreement because, as I said before, this work at Wirral slightly predates the SPP, although there were moves towards SPPs. But there was an acknowledgement that the public sector stakeholders in particular wanted to formalise the way of working and wanted to use the resources that were available to them and use their best endeavours to move projects forward. So a collaboration agreement was entered into, those governance structures were established, and we started to use the expertise that was available both at Homes England, both within the council and at the combined authority. And over time, what we have managed to do, although I won't steal Tom's thunder because he's here to talk about sort of the delivery strategy and how we pulled all of this together. Over time, though, that collaboration has enabled us to prepare a business case that ultimately has satisfied both the combined authority and Homes England and has enabled that investment to come forward. So if you could just move me on to the next slide, please. If I just hand you over to Tom now to outline the vision, we'll come back to that sort of funding strategy later.
Thanks, Catherine. Previous slides, Catherine showed some of the early developments around the docks where we're working with Peel, and that development is sort of coming out of the ground now. But our next sort of big project is the Hine Street Urban Village. Hine Street, the site, 65-acre site adjacent to the Birkenhead Town Centre, previously used as a gas holder site and railway sidings. So some fairly significant contamination issues there that we need to address before we can bring forward development on the site, but actually uniquely positioned, let's say, adjacent to the town centre, but equally it has 2 Metrolink stations on either end of the site, which would mean anybody living sort of in Hine Street, they've got a 5-minute journey into Liverpool city centre, which is actually better than most of the Liverpool suburbs, so uniquely located in that respect. We've been working with both Homes England and the combined authority and have now secured over £50 million worth of funding to bring the first phase of the development forward. Again, as Catherine mentioned, the sort of governance structure and the working together has been really, really important in the process of developing the joint business case and addressing some of the different criteria and requirements of the two different funders, and working that through as a partnership has been critical to the success of the project. So the funding that we've got will address the remediation requirements, provide some of the infrastructure and the greening and public space for the scheme. And that first phase delivers 633 homes overall. The site has the potential to create over 1,500 new homes and associated commercial space. And overall, we are looking at that 10%, minimum 10% affordable housing within the overall scheme. Should just move on to the next slide. So this is on this Birkenhead Central Station is immediately adjacent to Hine Street, but you can see on the left-hand slide as well the flyover. Actually, there's a little sort of series of flyovers built in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, initially really to ease traffic into the Birkenhead Tunnel, which is very close to the scheme as well. As part of the longer term vision for Hine Street, we will be demolishing those flyovers, which create quite a barrier between the existing central station and what will be Hine Street Urban Village and the town centre. We're a way off that. The phasing of that demolition probably won't start till 2027, but I think the removal of those flyovers will transform how the place looks and feels. There's a massive opportunity for Birkenhead to sort of really reshape the town centre and the perceptions of the place. Could you go on to the next slide, please? So in terms of delivery, Wirral Council are leading, will be the accountable body for the grant. We are working with Ion Property Developments, entering into a development agreement with them to bring forward development. They've been part of the process of developing the scheme. They appointed BDP, who designed the master plan. We've got the project team with a whole range of consultants, and we submitted a hybrid planning application, which is due to go to committee next month, and that's looking at detail consent for the remediation and the infrastructure works, and then it'll be reserved matters for the subsequent housing phases. So that there's been a number of challenges. What I would say is the relationship with Homes England and the combined authority has been absolutely critical to sort of making progress with the project. A lot of the challenges we face are similar to those that have been highlighted for Bradford. The BCR benefit cost ratio has been challenging. The values in Birkenhead create quite a significant viability issue, but we are confident that this scheme will deliver a really high quality sort of housing product and will be really successful in attracting people to live there. Next slide. Hand back to Catherine.
Thanks, Tom. Before we move on to Central Docks, I would just echo some of what Tom has said there. In terms of reflections on Hine Street, haven't gotten to a position where we've now secured investment. I think we as a team, as a joint project team, would consider what worked and what didn't work, and there was plenty that we would do differently, no doubt. But from what actually worked, the positive elements of that collaborative and joint working have been that we came together very early in terms of defining where we started with the council's ambition. They were clear with their ambition and vision. What they needed support on was that sort of, where do we start initially? The joint working between ourselves, the council, and Homes England enabled those early phases to emerge. And as I say, we now find ourselves with a significant public sector investment to kickstart the regeneration in the town centre. But what was really important is that we also were able to prioritise amongst those phases that the council want to bring forward. So is the vision looking at early phases, prioritising what we would work on and what we would collectively deploy resources on. And then probably what we learned most on was preparing a joint business case, because unlike some of the other propositions that we've taken forward, we actually took one business case forward for both CRSTS funding, which was the transport funding, and the bill funding, which is the route through which Homes England was able to invest. And again, that took some time, but we would quite possibly use that model going forward in similar sorts of scenarios. If you could just move me on. Thank you. Right. I couldn't leave Liverpool City Region without touching on Central Docks. Unfortunately, we're victims of our own success in that the Central Docks team, Peel and Liverpool City Council, couldn't attend today because we are now in the sort of last stages of negotiating legal contracts. So there is quite a significant legal meeting taking place at the same time. But if I just give you a flavour of how we've worked on the Central Docks proposition, it's actually quite different to the High Street proposition in that we and the council found ourselves working with a developer that already had quite advanced proposals in the Central Docks proposition. So Peel already had outline planning when they came to the council and to Homes England, but still had some viability challenges in taking forward the next phase of development. So there was already a significant phase one underway when we started to look at Central Docks, which is the next phase of Liverpool Waters. On face, it might be assumed that this was a scheme that, having delivered a phase one, possibly didn't require public sector investment. So again, from a Homes England perspective, we looked at what the right intervention might be. We didn't immediately start to talk about grants as you would expect. We looked at loans first, but there was a clear and very early indication that there was a viability challenge here. Liverpool City Council were very keen to see this project further developed because it sits within the Bramley Moor dock and the Everton New Stadium, and also the pier head at Liverpool. So quite a significant swathe of land along the dockland there. Phase one already delivered 1,000 homes, 2 new hotels. This is the next phase, the natural progression, which would enable that economic growth and that link back to the city centre. Again, it's one, if we're honest, it has taken 2 years plus to get to the stage where we started those conversations, to the stage where we are able to confirm investment in the scheme. But it is a significant investment. And again, it does have to follow due process. And though we did have to explore different types of intervention initially before we determined that actually it was a grant that was most appropriate. So just to fill in some of those blanks and give you some context, the docks are owned by Peel Waters. They've already done a phase one, and the Central Docks phase was identified by the Liverpool Strategic Futures panel as a key site that would stimulate economic growth, not just in Liverpool, but in Liverpool City Region. So the combined authority equally were very keen to see this site brought forward, albeit that it is Homes England that's actually invested in this next phase. We have worked again with Liverpool City Council when they were in quite a challenging time when we first started the discussion, but find themselves in a much better place now, sort of 2-3 years down the line. But again, they lacked the capacity at the time to work this proposition up. So the Homes England team went in, similar to High Street. We put a multifunctional team around this, so it's a team of economists, investment experts, and property experts to develop a proposition which the council were happy to be accountable body for. So this grant has been made available to the council, who will be the accountable body for delivery, albeit they will be entering into a separate contract with Peel as their developer partner. If you could just move me on, please. I think we would say that in respect of the Central Docks proposition, it has been more straightforward in that it had planning permission it is in the ownership of one landowner, and Liverpool City Council were clear that they wanted to be the accountable body. There was already a master plan. We knew what we were buying essentially within Central Docks. But I think in terms of lessons learned, again, if we reflect back to the Hine Street proposition, it is always about how we jointly prepare those business cases and how quickly we can get into a position whereby we can satisfy decision makers that there is a credible proposition here that is deliverable and that stakeholders buy into. I think that's probably it on the Central Docks proposition. Thank you, Freya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine and Tom. Yes, as it shows, we're going to go into a short Q&A section now on Liverpool. So again, we've just selected some of the questions from the chat, and we'll go out with those. So I think first one up for both of you, we had a question regarding the mix of affordable housing. Can you say anything more about the proportion of affordable housing here at the scheme?
I think I mentioned the overall requirement from a local plan perspective in this area is 10%. So that's the minimum we're looking at over the entire scheme. But that said, there are ongoing discussions with RPs, so we anticipate we will probably exceed that, but that's the minimum. But we are looking for a mix of type and tenure of housing on the site. So the first phase, certainly there's a significant proportion of townhouses rather than apartments. That switches in later phases to more apartment based, and it will be a range of tenures similar to the Bradford example. There'll be BTR. We're also looking at the possibility of some open market sales as well. So it will be a slightly iterative process because the housing will be built out over several years, and it will depend on the needs and indeed the market at a particular point that we're bringing those housing sites to the market. But sort of the basic is minimum of 10% of the overall scheme.
Got a question here. What have you been doing to counteract the issues with the BCR and viability? Has it been around building a stronger strategic case and supporting the narrative, or is there other more practical measures that you've done?
We might take this jointly, actually. The BCR was challenging because of the significant viability issues. However, we have continued to socialise this proposition from a very early stage. So we've worked both within Homes England and with the department to explain the value of this scheme. And also, if we're being, completely honest, to say it might not sit within what was acceptable parameters at certain stages, but we think because of the wider opportunity within Wirral, that whereas if you look at the HIF scheme, for example, those successful projects tended to sit around sort of 12k per unit. We're in a different sort of environment now, different market environment as well. So we were just very honest about what the likely grant per unit might be. And we did, again, very using the phrase that was used in this morning's session, we worked with economists that were able to look at wider benefits and wider outputs. But that's not to say that we weren't very clear at the outset that this might be a costly scheme to the public sector, but the benefits that would likely be derived would be worth that early public sector investment. And over time, we anticipated that the grant would obviously reduce for further phases and further schemes that come forward in the locality.
I think the other thing we had to do, because there are different models for assessing BCR ratios, so we actually had to explore different models to see which would give us the best outcome. I mean, it was slightly more challenging as well because it's a joint funded project with grant funding from the combined authority, whose outputs are very much around transport infrastructure, active travel, public transport, and Homes England, who obviously the housing units is the key output there. So we had to find a sort of a blend of the right outputs to maximise the BCR ratio. So there was quite a lot of work went into that, working with economists, working with the team at Homes England, the economist team there, to sort of agree the model and how best to present the case for the BCR.
Thank you both. I'll open this to both of you again. So what is the advice on setting out the right metrics to be achieved at the right level of detail and identifying wider benefits in line with business case asks?
I would honestly have posed that question to the economics guys. I think it is clear at the outset that we should be identifying the benefits to be derived from the project. Now, as Tom says, in this case, we were looking at transport benefits as well as housing benefits, as well as social value. But we did achieve the BCR that was required under the programme. So there is we shouldn't mislead anybody on the call at all. The scheme did achieve the BCR, but we did struggle during the course of pulling together the business case to see how we might make that BCR initially. And that's where we just had to work really keenly with the economists to ensure that we were exploring all of the benefits that we were able to within the parameters of the programme. But again, clear to emphasise that it did meet the BCR requirements, and it did meet the requirements around value for money, deliverability, etc. It's just as with many of the propositions that we consider, it is always very challenging from the outset. And if it wasn't very challenging from the outset, then we wouldn't be here talking about it and, you know, how you make this happen. Somebody else, the private sector, as an example, might be in there delivering these schemes. My advice would be bring the teams in very early, bring the right skill sets in at the outset, so that we are in as good a position as we can be in terms of looking at options and considering how we will develop that business case going forward.
Yeah, I haven't got a lot to add to that, but other than I think critical to getting to the point where we got to the BCR was that continuous sort of discussion engagement between sort of the council's economy team and Homes England particularly, but also the combined authority, and it became quite an iterative process in sort of building up the model and agreeing the approach. And that was critical. I think if we'd have just presented the BCR without having had that engagement in the process, we wouldn't be as far forward now. And you know, that was really, really critical. That partnership, again, sort of collaborative way of working.
Quite a simple one. Is the business case available online? Can people access that?
It's not. I'll review that. There will be some commercially sensitive elements within the business case, because obviously there are, you know, for our development partner Ion, but there are certainly elements that I see no reason why we couldn't sort of release. You know, for example, the strategic case and the like. But the document itself it's with all the appendices, it's quite lengthy.
You touched on challenges, Catherine, and someone's asked, have there been many challenges with designated sites and habitat regs at this stage?
Not on the two projects that we've outlined today. No, I don't think that's been one of the barriers that's been presented. If I'm honest, you know, we talk generally about the planning barriers that we all need to overcome, but what I find within the North, and particularly within the North West, is that viability, capacity at the partner level and planning are equally as difficult for partners to overcome. But no, I don't think that has been a specific issue for us at this point in time.
Got time for maybe one or two more, but I'll go for this one. So will tenures be mixed within blocks in regards to some of the larger ones in particular?
I think in terms of affordable, yes. So in terms of if an apartment block, that will have an element of affordable and sort of either BTR or market sale. I think with the housing, probably less so. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at a mixed, as I was saying before, a mixed tenure scheme.
I'll ask one last question then. It's around car parking. So it says, car parking is always an issue for higher density developments. What are practical solutions? And then in particular for Redbridge Quay, the Wirral Water development, what is the impact of underground parking on the sustainability credentials of the scheme? So, right, if you want.
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah.
I mean, Redbridge Quays is one of the Wirral Water's Peel schemes. That scheme, I think the ratio, the first phase of that completed has got 30 homes. I think the parking ratio is about 0.6 spaces per house. There isn't underground parking there; it's surface parking there. It's a bit more challenging. Wirral Waters, because the docks are about a mile outside the town centre, so that distance from the stations and the connectivity. So we are looking and working with the combined authority about a new mass transit scheme and active travel that will address some of those linkages. In High Street itself, we'll be looking at similar or even lower parking ratios. But again, as I set out at the beginning, one of the key locational factors in High Street is it's got 2 stations on the doorstep. Part of the scheme is creating new active travel links into the town centre and the wider area. So High Street, I think, is absolutely a model of what a sort of low car ownership city centre type of development should look like. And you know, we're obviously looking at other things like car clubs and the like to address sort of immediate needs that people might have for car, but not every day. So listen, it is a challenge because we are still quite a car-bound society, but we are trying through our development to shift away from that.
Thank you both. I think we'll have to close it there, but really great to have your thoughts. And I'll just mention that our local government capacity centre colleagues are going to respond to questions in the chat regarding further knowledge sharing and lessons learned sessions, so that they'll pick those up. But yeah, that concludes our session. So thank you all so much. I just want to say again, thank you for your contributions and time taken to come and join us today. I think we'll be wrapping up there. Thank you all. Thank you.